here I am going out to the public. I'm Huda Beauty. Sometimes I feel like Huda Ugly.
Yeah. We're into this beautiful, sculpted, ultra glamorous look.
Guys, this feels so good.
Oh my God. I'm not mad at it at all. I think it's so pretty.
Huda Kattan is one of the biggest names in beauty, with a business worth over $1 billion. We asked her what it means to be beautiful. Join me, Nuran Salam, for a special BBC 100 Women conversation with Huda Kattan on BBC News. Huda, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So you're in Paris right now to celebrate 10 years since the launch of Huda Beauty. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's
did
surreal.
Did you think in the start that 10 years on you'd be in this place?
When we launched the brand, I don't know what I was thinking, but I definitely was thinking it was more of an experiment. You know, I had an idea, to start a blog. Actually, my sisters really pushed me, especially my sister Muna. She was like, you need to be out there. You know so much about beauty. Share it with the world. You're so passionate about it. And then, one thing led to another. We started a beauty brand. And no, never in my wildest dreams did I think we would be here 10 years later.
But I want to take you back to even before starting Huda Beauty, before becoming a makeup artist even. So you were a child you grew up in Tennessee in the States, and your family had moved from Iraq to the US.
That's right.
So to a different cultural scene and to a place where not many people looked like you.
Yeah.
What was life like?
It was tough. I especially think at that time I really struggled with my identity. I definitely struggled. I know we have a beauty brand now and we speak so much about beauty, but I definitely struggled with my own concept of beauty and who I felt I was. I didn't see people who looked like me around, and I definitely got the feeling like I was not considered beautiful. It was definitely something in the community because I didn't look like anybody, and I definitely wasn't considered attractive. But I felt even at home, maybe the beauty standards that my family held maybe were not also, what I represented. Because even in the Arab culture, sometimes lighter skin is celebrated. And I was always really proud of my dark skin, or my medium, I'm tanned, medium skin. And I was always really proud of that. So for me, I struggled with that a lot as a child.
And now you have a global business and a global brand and millions of fans. Your brand is a lot about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think I think many people when they start a company, when you start something, you don't realize you're going to start doing things according to your younger self. And in the beginning it was like, okay, people want lashes. Okay, give them lashes. But as this brand started to develop, I started to feel like if I was going to continue, I needed a purpose. And I did a lot of therapy through the brand. Yeah, the brand was like, I had to do like a lot of like the deep work. And I realized there was something missing for me and my younger self. And so I started to talk a lot about those things because they were very important for me. They were really driving me and I didn't realize it. The lack of inclusivity, the lack of representation was such a big driver for me. And now I think it's something that expands even outside of just like who I am, but really making people feel like they have the ability to be beautiful and powerful is really, really important to me. And I think back to sometimes that the little Middle Eastern brown girl in Tennessee, and there's still a lot of them out there in the world. And maybe them seeing something, like myself, they can feel a little bit represented and maybe even really powerful,
And you're also championing inclusion across the other brands.
Absolutely.
Is the industry moving in the right direction?
I think it's moving, but at a snail's pace. I think that sometimes we are more vocal about it on social media. We're so loud about it, but the progress is slow. And sometimes I think beauty brands don't know what to do. Like they just don't know. And I've been in the labs. I've been in the labs with the manufacturers and I've said to them, I need a richer skin tone product. And I've seen them literally put black pigment in a product. I'm like, well, people's skin were made of very many different tones. I think there's still a lack of understanding. And it really comes down fundamentally to the manufacturer and even some brands. I think if you haven't felt it, you don't know what it feels like, And sometimes I think it becomes more of a marketing thing versus like an actual purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think because I've been there, I felt it, I've heard some stories that it's like ingrained in us. Do I think that inclusivity will be ever, really met in the beauty industry? I'm not so sure. I don't know. I don't see that really completely happening. But
Why?
I don't know. I think it's just too hard for brands sometimes. Sometimes I feel like they just, no matter what they're trying to do, sometimes they're struggling with really getting all of those things done, you know? It's hard. It's a hard thing.
You've been known to appear online with no makeup on at
Yeah.
all, like when you're showing your fans how to apply different products.
Yeah.
When you started doing that, did it feel strange? Did you feel vulnerable?
I think when, when you're somebody who's known for a look, you sometimes become almost like a prisoner to your appearance. And not even just my physical appearance, but to my name. What am I? I'm a beauty blogger. So in essence, everybody always expects me to be perfect. They expect my nails to be done. They expect my hair to be done. They expect me not to have a breakout. And that's just not reality. And I definitely, for a long time, felt like I was a prisoner to my Instagram handle. I felt, here I am going out to the public. I'm Huda Beauty. Sometimes I feel like Huda Ugly, you know? And that's how I would genuinely feel. And so it would be almost like, I felt like a prisoner for a little while. I think the turning point for me was when we launched our Wishful skincare line. And, I made a really strong comment with my team. I was like, I want to, shoot this campaign, no makeup, no Photoshop, which skincare, it's crazy to think people always use makeup in the campaigns, but they do. And when we decided we wanted to do it, I think there was a celebrity skincare brand that launched. It was very obvious they were wearing makeup. And I was like, I really think we should expose the truth. Let's show it for what it is. And when we shot the campaign, it was one of the most vulnerable experiences of my life because I was in front of a camera. I didn't have the Photoshop. I couldn't rely on that. The photo had to be good. If the photo's not perfect, you always Photoshop something. If there's something going on, I can Photoshop it right. If my something doesn't look well, I didn't sleep well the night before, I can use concealer to cover that up. And for the first time in my life, here I am for the world to see me as I am. And I need them to accept me that way. But I found that I was not accepting myself. And that was such a churning point for me. I had to have a real conversation with myself. I had to look at the photos. I saw myself and I had to say, Huda, look at that person, that woman. She is so much more than what you see. And you need to love her and celebrate her. And it was a real turning point for me.
Do you think, in general, all women are sometimes too harsh on themselves? They put pressure, or the society puts pressure on them to look a certain way and to live up to expectations?
I think society has always been hard on women, but now with social media, the expectations are just unfair. I personally feel when I go on social media, sometimes I feel I can never be good looking enough. I can never have achieved enough, which is crazy because we need to be balanced as human beings. But when you go on social media, you feel the pressure that continuously adds up. But I think we live our life through comparison, and that's a real problem. You only get value depending on who you compare your life to. And now with social media being what it is, us constantly being exposed to everybody's perfect life, which is, we know, not perfect, the amount of pressure is just so unrealistic and so unhealthy.
But Huda, some viewers listening to you now will be thinking that you as an influencer on social media and also as a beauty, a makeup company owner, do you ever worry that you might be adding to that pressure?
Absolutely, 100%. And this is the thing where I feel like we are a part of that problem. I am a part of that problem. But I am in this never-ending loop. And the one thing I can do is to try to talk about it, just try to be open about it. Because the one thing I hate sometimes is that we don't talk about these things. I have so many people messaging me all the time, like, how is your life so perfect? And I tell them, I was melting down before I took this photo, And I would like the space to be more vulnerable. I don't know where that space exists. I don't think it exists on Instagram, but we have to create it. We have to create it as a community. The reality is when you post those things, you get comments like, oh, nobody cares about your problems. And you signed up for this. And so we're in this really tough position as a society to want to move things forward, but then we get criticized for those things as well. Oftentimes I find as an influencer and a personality on the web, you're almost treated like you are not human. And that's really, really tough,
Yeah.
And
how do you deal with it?
I have to disconnect a lot, and I find myself disconnecting from social media a lot. I actually, as a person on the internet, I don't spend that much time on the internet. Surprisingly, I don't. Yeah, I mean, my screen time is very low.
Really?
I find when I spend a lot of time on the internet, it starts off with one thing. I'm talking to somebody from my community. It's a DM and it's getting really nice, and then all of a sudden I end up on another page, and before you know it, it starts off from a good place, but then I end up feeling really bad. And then I end up not feeling so good about myself. So I have a screen time limit on my phone. I've also removed social media from my daughter. She's not allowed on the internet at all. She's 12. She does go on it behind my back sometimes, but I can see a difference in her anxiety levels when she's not on it versus when she's on it.
I actually wanted to ask about your daughter because she has featured in some of your online posts before, and you've often said that the posts that have your daughter get the most likes.
Yeah.
And she gets lots of compliments, but people can also say some really horrible things.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? And what if, when moving on to her teenage years, she actually sees them herself?
Yeah.
What would your advice be?
It's tough because, she's at a stage where she's seeing me as an influencer too, as a personality. But I said, she's too young for this stuff because it starts off in a nice place, but the criticism is really intense. She's already been exposed to some criticism at a young age. We've had to educate her. I had to say to her, if somebody says a nice compliment to you, what does that mean to you? And if they say a mean thing to you, what does it mean to you? This is just a person's opinion. What does that mean to you?
So you sit down and have these conversations with her?
We have such deep conversations with her. I think from an emotional intelligence perspective, she's incredibly advanced. But it still doesn't mean she's not going to be affected by these things. So we still keep everything away from her. Recently, we completely took away all her social media.
Going back to the family, so you come from a Muslim background,
Yes.
and you've talked about your mom, and she wears the hijab and leads a quite conservative life.
Yes,
How do you balance your heritage with the need to self-express in the same time?
It's hard sometimes because as a Muslim woman, and I love my faith so much. For me, I didn't really grow up very religious. I became more spiritual as I became older. And I found that things from my religion just really calmed me. Like prayer to me is one of the most beautiful experiences. And, I started waking up for Fajr earlier this year, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And so making sure that I do those things has been really good for me. But sometimes I don't speak about it because I'm always afraid of the criticism because I don't cover because of these things. Like people might say, oh, you're not allowed to do those things. So sometimes it becomes hard. And my mom has always been, somebody who's taught me like only God can judge you. And it's a personal relationship between you and your creator. And you can't really take other people's into perspective. And I really do believe that. I believe fundamentally you need to know who you are. You need to know who you are. You need to be comfortable and grounded in who you are. I think that, again, like being somebody who can constantly get criticism and opinions, you sometimes just need to have your own grounding. And so for me, my faith is so important to me, but it's my thing. I don't necessarily need everyone's opinion when it comes to my faith.
But does it influence your work?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
What way?
All the time. It's funny because sometimes like even, today, my sister wanted to post some pictures. And I was like, no, too much leg. No, too much cleavage. No. All the time. So I definitely try to be, I think, a little bit more, I think, conservative with some of the posts that I post. Yeah.
So you're someone who's regularly inviting people to pay attention to the way you look. It's the nature of the job.
Yeah.
You get compliments, but you also get criticisms,
Yes.
as you've been saying.
Yeah.
Do you think that your experience is different because you're a woman?
I think it really depends. Like I know as a woman, if I expose myself and I post, I can definitely get a different kind of, even from my Muslim followers, I get a different reaction. It's like, whoa, you look amazing, whoa. So I think like that can kind of happen. I don't know if that happens for men. I think as a woman, the biggest challenge I have had has not necessarily been online, but has been in the business world. That has been one of the biggest challenges I've ever had. And I was quite surprised. I think I was naive to assume, I come from, my dad, who is pretty traditional, but he really celebrates, minorities. He celebrates women. My dad is a feminist. And so I think I was a bit naive to think that because, you know, my father is this, you know, really amazing, strong Arab man, that I was going to get the same celebration I got from him from, you know, maybe some people in the Middle East. And when I became a businesswoman, I struggled so bad. People did not take me seriously. They would be in a meeting, and instead of making eye contact with me, they would make eye contact with my husband and completely ignore me. And my husband, again, who's another wonderful man who celebrates women, would say, "Don't talk to me, talk to her." And they would ignore him and just keep talking to him. And that was really a tough thing. And I had some really horrible comments too, as a businesswoman. You know, treatment I know a man would never get. And I was so naive to think that you would not face those type of things as a woman. But then to experience them, I was so shocked, you know.
Huda, you're right now living in Dubai, which is a glamorous place, of course. How do you stay connected to your fans back in the US who might be leading less glamorous lives, or even in other Arab countries?
Yeah. You know, I do live a very glamorous life. I'm very, you know, fortunate to live in a place like Dubai that is, you know, everything really does go in Dubai, but there is ultra glamour all the time, everywhere you go. Sometimes you actually even get sick of the glamorous side because you just want something that's really simple.
So how do you take that into account now? How do you make sure that you don't fall into the trap of selling people unrealistic standards of beauty, for instance?
I think that's when we started talking about some of the beauty standard issues, you know. And at the end of the day, you know, everybody has their own perception of what beauty is. You know, everybody has their own issues with their own perspective of what beauty means to them, their own identity within beauty. And the reality is, the one thing that I realized is that you need to accept it from people. The criticism is part of the problem. Because if we had less criticism, we'd probably be more open about some of the things that we're dealing with. We'd probably be more open about some of the things that we're doing. We'd probably be more open about some of the things that are not really real, but that we are, you know, sometimes fabricating or manufacturing for Instagram. And that was kind of where we started to open. We started to talk about the beauty standards, and you know, we stopped using Photoshop in our campaigns. We stopped, you know, really doing a lot of things, filtering photos, which sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I still use a filter if the lighting is horrible. And I'm like, I know I don't look like this, but I need a filter, or I'm really, really tired. But I'm so happy because a long time ago, the platforms didn't say if you were using a filter. Now they tell you. So before it was like a little bit like you don't know if the person's using a filter. And so
do you think that campaigns like yours managed to make
I think so, because we were demanding that. We were demanding, okay, you know what, people want to use filters, but can we just please be honest about it? I think we were a part of a bigger thing, like many people, you know, were demanding that. And I think, I do think that I think we were part of the change. We work close to the platforms as well. So we know they see what we're saying. You know, we work very close with them. So I think so. I hope so, because I hope that means that they're listening to us, you know, as creators, and they're listening to what their communities want. You know, I don't want to be too idealistic to say that the standards are, you know, improving, but I think the conversations are improving for sure.
How would you respond to criticisms like about the beauty industry that in its core or in its essence, it's actually sexist because it's feeding onto women's insecurities about the way they look?
I think the beauty industry is sexist in the fact that it objectifies women a lot of times. It really can boil women down to just their appearance, absolutely. And but I think we would be naive to say that we don't do it as people too. You know, as much as I get so frustrated when I feel like people are judging me, when I walk into our building as a woman who likes to glam, it's part of my self-love process. I love to do the glamour, I love it. When I walk into a building and I see people, they look at me, they're like, you know, they roll their eyes at me. And I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. But then I also find sometimes, will we do the same thing to other people as well? Like, will we also do that? I think we sometimes are too quick to judge.
So how can Huda Beauty, which is part of the industry, make sure that you don't do that?
It's a tough thing, but I think the conversations are where it starts, you know, and also backing it up.
Yeah, some people would say the opposite perspective, would say that the beauty industry is actually fulfilling a need for women, and it could be a feminist thing.
Yeah.
Would that be something that you'd subscribe to?
I think it's personal for each person, you know. The reason why I fell in love with beauty for me, my personal reason, is because I saw how empowering it was for me. And that was my experience, and I think each person's experience is going to be different. One of my favorite memories, actually an experience that I had, was with a fellow, she was a journalist, and we were traveling together. And, she was telling me her life story, and she had been through some pretty tough things. And we were at a NARS counter, and I bought her a product, and we put it on her. And, I saw her transform right in front of me. We were going up these escalators. We were somewhere in Asia, and she took her hair down, and she just you could see the transformation right in front of you. This woman all of a sudden just felt a little bit better about herself. Doesn't matter that it was a lipstick or a blush that made her feel better, but it was something that she put on that brought something within her out. That for me is what makeup is to me. I realize there's a lot of judgment. People do see it on the outside, but it doesn't really matter. It's the personal thing that people experience. That for me is the reason why I fell in love with makeup.
Huda, you have a huge platform, obviously, with millions of followers. How do you use your influence? Do you feel an obligation to speak out on any particular issues?
I do. When we first started to have a following on social media, I was a little bit, we used, my image was on products, but I didn't talk about my personal story so much. And as our, voice became bigger, our platform became more of a platform, I started to feel the need to speak up towards certain things. So I have used my voice in things, especially over the past, I would say, 5 years.
Which issues?
I mean, I am passionate about, obviously the things that affect women, beauty standards, but also things affecting my, my community as well. I've been outspoken about, sometimes some political things as well. I don't pretend to be a political expert. I'm not by any means, but if I see something and I know some of the information, I definitely want to post about it too.
Where is social media going? What direction is it taking? Is it going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, or are people going to go off social media in the future? What do you think?
Where is social media going? I don't know if it's going into the right space, if I'm being honest. When it first started, I loved social media. I thought it was just the best thing. It democratized voices. It gave everybody the opportunity to speak up. I think social media as a whole, the concept had been brewing for years before Facebook came out, and now that it's come out, and it was supposed to be like a place where people connected, and now it's become a dopamine hacking algorithm to keep people's eyes glued into a screen. Do I agree with social media now? No, I don't. Do I think it's good for the future? No, I don't. I don't anymore.
Do you worry about your daughter growing up?
I worry about everybody, to be honest, on earth right now, because the reality is we are disconnecting from ourselves so much. The mental health issues are so high right now. That really scares me. And I think it's because of the lack of connectivity with ourselves. We're constantly glued to our phones. And what scares me is that it's really become unsafe. It's become something that is not about even your interest. It's about sometimes even swaying political issues. And we've seen that, in the past.
People will be surprised when they hear someone like Huda Kattan saying that she has limits on her screen time.
Yeah.
So you feel the negative aspects of it.
Absolutely. And I worry for myself as well. I have definitely struggled with my mental health more than ever before because of social media. And this is why I have the screen time. And I also now, I make sure I make a point not to go on social media first thing in the morning. But it's a dangerous thing. Those algorithms are stronger than we are. They are, you will just be interested and you'll just see something that is negative and you'll click on it. And you may not even be liking it, but all of a sudden your algorithm is going to continuously give you dark things. I've been speaking to some people in my community, they're not influencers, they're people, they just have like few followers, and the amount of things they're dealing with are really tough. The conversations I'm having with them are really tough. And I know it's stemming from social media, and that's what scares me.
As an influencer, do you think you're empowering women just like you? Maybe women who look like you're inspiring them?
I hope so. I want to think I am, I don't know if that's what I thought was going to happen in the very beginning. But as I started to get messages like you're an inspiration, I started to say, oh my God, like this is actually something I have to do now. Sometimes you start something out of a hobby and then you somehow end up finding a purpose with it. And then that's a great space to be in. Like, you love it, and then you have a purpose with it. That's great. But, you know, I think I would like to think so. My whole thing is I just want people to know that there's nothing holding them back. You know, it's just themselves that might be holding them back. But yeah, social scares me though. I'm like, social media is the way to get yourself out there, but now it's also scary. So it's a bit of a tough world also right now. I think influencers and people who are starting nowadays also have to get over that hurdle. They need to take care of themselves mentally. You know, they need to have a strong foundation. That's really important.
Huda Kattan, thank you for speaking with us today, and thank you for being one of this year's BBC 100 Women.
Thank you so much. I'm honored. Thank you so much. Thank you.